Can you imagine being told you're dead to your boyfriend just because you refuse to hand over every single dollar you earn? That's exactly what Malcolm, my now ex-boyfriend, screamed at me, all because I wouldn't bankroll his dream Dodge Challenger. And when I say every single dollar, I mean every single dollar. My entire paycheck, the one I bust my butt for 40 hours a week as a pharmacy technician. Let me tell you, it's not exactly a high-roller salary, but it's my hard-earned money. I spend my days dealing with insurance nightmares and customers who act like it's my personal fault their medication costs too much. This money is for my life. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, honestly. The real gut punch? This absolute clown, yes, I said it, went online and blasted me in some viral post, calling me a broke gold digger. Let that sink in. He's the one demanding my money, and somehow I'm the gold digger? It makes zero sense. But suddenly, half the internet thought I was this awful girlfriend who wouldn't support her man's dreams. The post blew up, shared across Facebook and Instagram. People I work with started seeing it. My coworker Emily actually showed it to me on her phone during lunch at CVS, and in that moment, all I wanted was to crawl under the pharmacy counter and just vanish. The sheer embarrassment was soul-crushing. When I tried to defend myself in the comments, explaining that I actually have rent and bills to pay, and oh yeah, need to eat food occasionally, Malcolm completely lost his mind. He called me while I was literally restocking medications. His voice was dripping with venom as he told me to delete my comments and stop making him look bad, or he would leak screenshots of our private text conversations. And I mean private stuff, intimate messages, pictures, sensitive conversations about my family drama, my parents' divorce, everything vulnerable I had ever shared with him. He threatened that if I didn't do exactly what he said, everyone would see exactly what kind of person I really am. The pure, blazing rage that surged through me in that moment. I was standing there in my work uniform, desperately trying to keep my voice down so no customer would hear me having a full-blown meltdown next to the blood pressure monitors. My hands were shaking. Who does that? Who threatens someone they claim to love with public humiliation and digital revenge? I had to excuse myself, practically ran to the employee bathroom, and just stood there, shaking, tears of anger welling up. And then, his mom, his freaking mother, Barbara, had the utter nerve to message me on Facebook, saying I brought this whole mess on myself for not being supportive enough of her precious son's goals. She sent this long, rambling paragraph about how a real woman would sacrifice for her man, and how utterly disappointed she was in my attitude. I mean, seriously, lady? Your 32-year-old son is throwing a tantrum because his girlfriend won't bankrupt herself for his midlife crisis car. Barbara, with a straight face, told me that when she was my age, women knew how to put their men first. This is 2025, not 1955. Meanwhile, Malcolm was out there, posting updates about how he put me in my place and how women these days don't understand loyalty. His friends were all over it, showering his posts with fire emojis and calling me names I wouldn't even think about repeating here. And the random strangers. I was getting message after message, telling me I was selfish, that I didn't deserve him. One girl actually wrote that I should be grateful any man wants to include me in his dreams. The comments were making me physically sick, but like a train wreck, I couldn't tear my eyes away. But here's what truly twisted my stomach into knots. This car, this glorious Dodge Challenger, costs $48,000. $48,000. He legitimately expected me to hand over my entire November paycheck, my December paycheck, probably even my January and February ones, just so he could drive around feeling like some kind of action hero. When I dared to point out that I have student loans, car insurance, groceries, and my half of the rent for the apartment was share, he actually looked at me, deadpan, and said those were my problems to figure out. The man who sleeps in my bed every single night, who eats the groceries I buy, told me my basic living expenses were my problems to figure out, all while demanding I fund his toy. I make about $32,000 a year before taxes. He wanted me to give him more than I make in over a year, just so he could have a faster car than his friend Graham. The sheer audacity. I'd been with Malcolm for 2 years and 3 months. To be exact, we'd moved in together last spring, just when his lease was up and mine was ending anyway. Things weren't perfect, but they were decent enough. He makes around $55,000, which is more than me, but apparently not enough for the specific car he wanted right now, immediately, with absolutely no planning or saving. This whole obsession kicked off in September, the moment his friend Graham rolled up in some bright red Camaro. Suddenly, Malcolm decided his own car was embarrassing and beneath him. He started spending literally hours every night online, glued to car listings, showing me pictures of these expensive machines, acting like I was supposed to get excited about us going into crippling debt for them. He'd interrupt my favorite shows just to shove another listing in my face, and then get annoyed when I didn't share his bizarre enthusiasm. When I cautiously suggested maybe, saving up first, or perhaps looking at certified pre-owned options that wouldn't require my entire financial contribution, he just got annoyed. He said I didn't understand his vision. His vision, apparently, required my entire paycheck while he kept all his money for whatever he wanted. He actually told me that real couples make sacrifices for each other's happiness, but somehow, all the sacrificing was supposed to come exclusively from me. Last week, his demands ratcheted up, becoming aggressive, relentless. He'd bring up the car every single day, during dinner, while we watched TV, when I was getting ready for work in the morning. He constantly droned on about how this car would change his life, make him feel confident and successful. He truly believed he deserved nice things after working so hard, and that I, his girlfriend, should want to make that happen. When I dared to point out that I work hard, too, and also deserve to have my basic needs met, he actually scoffed. He said that was different because his career has more potential, and my pharmacy tech job was just something I do until I find something better. Except, I actually like my job. I'm good at it, and I wasn't looking for anything different until he decided my career wasn't impressive enough to matter. Then he pulled out a financing calculator. He'd already meticulously figured out exactly how much of my paychecks he'd need for the next several months. He had it all mapped out, like I'd already agreed to this insane, financially suicidal arrangement. When I finally told him, absolutely not, he got that wounded look on his face, like I'd personally insulted his very existence. That's when he hit me with it. I was being selfish and unsupportive. Maybe he needed to reconsider our whole relationship if I wasn't willing to invest in our future together. Our future, apparently, being him in a cool car while I ate ramen noodles for 6 months. I tried to explain, patiently, that my student loan payments alone are $400 a month. If I don't pay my car insurance, I can't legally drive to work, which means I can't earn the very money he wanted me to give him. But he just kept dismissing it all, saying I was making excuses and not thinking creatively about solutions. His creative solution was for me to ask my parents for money, or pick up extra shifts, or sell some of my stuff. My parents are already helping me with my student loans sometimes when things get tight. They're not wealthy people who can just hand over thousands of dollars so their daughter's boyfriend can buy a fancy car. And I already work full-time, plus pick up extra shifts when they're available. What stuff was I supposed to sell? My furniture, my work clothes, my literal medications. The absurdity was mind-numbing. But honestly, after the threats, the public humiliation, and his mother swooping in like some kind of backup reinforcement, something inside me completely shifted. I wasn't the same girl who was trying to be understanding about his ridiculous car dreams yesterday. The sheer disrespect and calculated manipulation had crossed a line I didn't even know I had, until he stomped all over it. Malcolm thought he had me cornered with his threats and his pathetic little social media campaign, all designed to embarrass me into compliance. He truly believed I'd cave, that I'd just hand over my money to make the drama stop, and go back to being his supportive girlfriend who conveniently never asked inconvenient questions about finances. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. By the way, if you're still with me and shaking your head in disbelief, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the rest of this unbelievable story, or the ones still to come. So, Malcolm thought he had me cornered, right? He believed I'd just buckle under the pressure. But then, Wednesday morning, the situation escalated into an absolute nightmare I'm still trying to process. I was at Wegmans, doing my weekly grocery shopping, trying to stretch my tight budget. Because, someone thought I should be handing over my paychecks. As I was loading bags into my car, I heard this saccharine, sneering voice behind me. Well, if it isn't the selfish girlfriend who won't support her man. I turned around, and there she was, Barbara, Malcolm's mom, arms crossed, looking like she was about to deliver a sermon. That fake sweet smile that never quite reached her eyes, dressed to the nines like it was Sunday church, not Wednesday morning in a grocery store parking lot. My gut instantly screamed, this is not going to be pleasant. She immediately launched into it, lecturing me about how she raised Malcolm to expect better from the women in his life, and how utterly disappointed she was that I'd turned out to be so self-centered. Standing right there, in the middle of a public parking lot, she told me a real woman would find a way to make her man's dreams come true, instead of making excuses about bills and rent. I really did, to stay calm. I explained that I have legitimate financial responsibilities, that I can't just hand over money I need for basic living expenses. But Barbara wasn't having any of it. She cut me off, said Malcolm had told her I was being dramatic about my situation, and that if I really loved him, I'd figure it out. Then she dropped the bomb that made my blood boil. Maybe you're just not the right kind of girl for my son if you can't even do this one thing for him. The sheer audacity. This woman, cornering me at the grocery store, trying to shame me into bankrupting myself for her adult son's car obsession. I fired back, telling her that Malcolm's financial planning was absolutely not my responsibility, and since he makes more money than me anyway, maybe he should save up for his own purchases, like a grown adult. That's when she got truly nasty. She sneered that I was clearly raised wrong and didn't understand what being in a relationship meant. She actually said my parents obviously didn't teach me proper values about supporting a partner. Bringing my parents into it. People she doesn't even know. That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I told her my parents taught me to be independent and, more importantly, not to let people take advantage of me, which sounded like pretty excellent values to me. Barbara's face went beet red. She declared that that attitude was exactly the problem with girls my generation. We think we're too good to make sacrifices for love. But then, it got absolutely insane. She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a second, and then shoved it in my face. It was Malcolm's viral post about me being a gold digger. She stood there, in the parking lot, reading the comments out loud, the really nasty ones, calling me selfish and materialistic. She was literally reading internet strangers insulting me to my face, like it was some irrefutable proof that she was right. I asked her, with as much calm as I could muster, if she thought it was appropriate for her son to publicly humiliate his girlfriend online just because he didn't get his way. Her response: sometimes men have to take drastic measures to get through to stubborn women. She actually said Malcolm was just trying to help me see reason, and that I should be grateful he cared enough to try to teach me better. Teach me better. Like I was some disobedient pet needing training. I was so consumed with anger, I could barely speak, but I managed to tell her that threatening to leak private messages wasn't teaching. It was manipulation and emotional abuse. Barbara just laughed it off, said I was being overly dramatic, and that Malcolm would never actually do anything to hurt me. She claimed he just needed me to understand how serious he was about this car, how important it was to him. She kept insisting that if I really loved him, I'd want to make him happy, even if it meant some temporary inconvenience for me. Temporary inconvenience. That's what she called me not being able to pay for food and rent for months. Then, she said something that made me realize this entire family was completely twisted. She told me that when she was engaged to Malcolm's father, she gave him money for a motorcycle he wanted, even though it meant she had to move back in with her parents for a while. She said, that's what women do for the men they love, and she was proud to make that sacrifice. I pointed out, sharply, that she was talking about her fiancé, not some boyfriend she'd been dating for 2 years, and that moving in with family isn't exactly the same as being unable to afford basic necessities. But she just kept going on and on about how modern women don't understand commitment and loyalty. The conversation grew even weirder as she started rambling about how Malcolm deserves to feel proud and confident and how having nice things is important for a man's self-esteem. She said I should want to contribute to his success and happiness instead of holding him back with my selfishness. As if his self-esteem was somehow my financial responsibility. I asked her point blank. Did she honestly think it was reasonable for Malcolm to expect his girlfriend to give him her entire paycheck when he makes more money than her and could easily save up for the car himself? She just dismissed it. That wasn't the point. The point was that couples should support each other's dreams, and I was failing as a partner. But then she dropped the real bombshell, the one that showed me just how messed up this whole situation truly was. She told me that Malcolm had been talking to her about our relationship for months, complaining that I wasn't ambitious enough and didn't seem invested in building a future together. She said he'd been questioning whether I was really girlfriend material or just someone he was wasting time with. So, apparently, Malcolm had been badmouthing me to his mother for months before this car situation even came up. He'd been building a case against me, painting me as some inadequate girlfriend who wasn't measuring up to his standards. The car demand wasn't really about the car at all. It was some kind of twisted test to see if I'd prove my devotion by absolutely destroying my financial stability for his shallow wants. I told Barbara, my voice shaking with indignation, that I didn't appreciate being discussed and judged behind my back, and that if Malcolm had concerns about our relationship, he should have talked to me directly instead of running to Mommy about his problems. That really set her off. She accused me of being disrespectful and proving exactly what kind of person I was. She started raising her voice, attracting attention from other shoppers in the parking lot, yelling that I was going to lose Malcolm if I didn't change my attitude and start acting like a supportive girlfriend. She actually said he had options and didn't have to settle for someone who wasn't willing to invest in their relationship. I snapped back, telling Barbara that any man who would threaten and publicly humiliate his girlfriend for not funding his luxury purchases wasn't worth keeping. And maybe Malcolm should find someone who shares his values about relationships being financial transactions. She got even more furious, calling me bitter and vindictive, claiming I'd regret throwing away a good relationship over money. But here's the thing that truly chilled me. She kept calling it a good relationship, as if public humiliation, threats, and financial manipulation were signs of a healthy partnership, as if Malcolm's vile behavior was normal, and my refusal to accept it was the problem. The whole confrontation lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. By the end, Barbara was practically screaming at me in the parking lot, saying I was making a huge mistake, and how Malcolm deserved better than someone who wouldn't even try to make his dreams come true. She swore I'd end up alone and miserable if I kept thinking I was too good to compromise for love. I finally told her I was done, and started to get in my car. But she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and said Malcolm was going to call me later, and I better think carefully about what I wanted to say to him. She said this was my last chance to fix things before he decided I wasn't worth the trouble. The implied threat was crystal clear: comply or lose him. Except, at this point, losing him was starting to sound like the better option. After she finally left, I just sat in my car for a solid 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The fact that Malcolm had actually sent his mother to ambush me at the grocery store was so far beyond normal relationship problems, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. What kind of man sends his mom to harass his girlfriend into giving him money? But I also realized something else profound during that horrible conversation. Malcolm and Barbara kept talking about what I should do for him, what I owed him, what kind of girlfriend I should be. Nobody ever mentioned what he should do for me, or how he should treat someone he supposedly loves. It was all about my obligations, and his needs, and my failings as a partner. They had the whole thing completely twisted, where I was the problem for having boundaries, and Malcolm was the victim for not getting everything he wanted immediately. Where my financial survival was less important than his emotional satisfaction. Where his dreams mattered more than my reality. So, I got home from Wegmans around noon, putting away groceries and just trying to shake off that confrontation with Barbara, when my phone started ringing. It was Malcolm, of course. His mom had practically guaranteed it. Part of me wanted to just let it go to voicemail, but I knew he'd just keep calling. And honestly, after that parking lot ambush, I was kind of in the mood to watch him dig himself into an even deeper hole. Sometimes, when people are this ridiculous, you just have to let them keep talking so you can fully appreciate the absurdity. He started off all fake casual, asking how my day was going. Like he didn't know his mom had just spent 20 minutes screaming at me about what a terrible girlfriend I was. So, I cut right to the point. Did you send Barbara to ambush me at the grocery store? Or did she come up with that brilliant plan all by herself? Malcolm immediately got defensive. He sputtered that his mother was just concerned about our relationship and wanted to help me understand his perspective better. He actually said Barbara thought maybe hearing from another woman about how relationships work might get through to me in a way he couldn't manage on his own. The sheer condescension in his voice when he said how relationships work made me want to throw my phone across the room. I told him, straight up, that sending his mommy to corner me in a parking lot and lecture me about my values wasn't helping our relationship. It was showing me exactly what kind of man he really is. That's when he started getting annoyed, claiming I was twisting everything around and making his family out to be villains when they were just trying to help save our relationship. Then he launched into this whole speech about how disappointed he was in my reaction to what he called his simple request for support. He said he'd been thinking, and he realized the problem was I didn't understand how important this car was to him and his future success. He actually used the words future success, as if buying an expensive car was going to magically transform his career. I couldn't help myself. I asked him to explain exactly how a Dodge Challenger was going to improve his job performance. He got instantly furious, accusing me of being deliberately obtuse and missing the bigger picture. He started droning on about image and confidence and how successful people invest in things that project success. He said I was thinking small and holding both of us back with my limited mindset. The manipulation was so pathetic, so utterly obvious, that I almost laughed out loud right then and there. Here was this grown man, seriously trying to convince me that demanding my rent money was somehow reasonable, using the same tired, transparent tactics that probably worked on insecure women before me. But I could see right through him now. Every single guilt trip, every desperate attempt to make me feel selfish for having basic financial needs, every pathetic argument about success and investment. What kind of loser tries to gaslight his girlfriend into funding his midlife crisis car? As I listened to him fumble through these manipulative talking points, all I could think was how embarrassing it must be to be this desperate, this transparent. Normal boyfriends don't hold private conversations hostage to extort money from their partners. And the fact that Malcolm thought this was acceptable behavior just showed me exactly what kind of man I'd been wasting my time with. But then he said something that truly showed me how twisted his thinking had become. He told me he'd been talking to his friends about our situation, and they all agreed that I was being unreasonable and selfish. He even brought up Graham, saying Graham specifically told him that when he bought his Camaro, his girlfriend Emily didn't hesitate to help with the down payment because she understood that his success was their success. I pointed out, calmly, that Graham and Emily have been together for 5 years and are engaged, not just 2-year dating partners, and that they probably discussed major financial decisions together, instead of one person demanding the other's entire paycheck. But Malcolm just blustered. That's exactly my point. Real couples who are serious about their future make these kinds of investments together. He told me that getting this car wasn't just about wanting something nice. It was about proving that we were ready to take our relationship to the next level. He actually said couples who can't make financial sacrifices for each other aren't ready for marriage and maybe shouldn't be wasting each other's time. So, in Malcolm's twisted, narcissistic mind, bankrupting myself for his car was some kind of warped relationship test to prove I was marriage material. He had turned his selfish want into a measurement of my commitment and love for him. I asked him point blank if he was seriously suggesting that my willingness to give him my rent money was a prerequisite for any future we might have together. And he, without a trace of irony, said that successful relationships require sacrifice and compromise from both partners. When I pointed out, with growing exasperation, that all the sacrifice seemed to be coming from me while he kept all his money for himself. He got really angry. Malcolm started yelling that I was being dramatic and turning everything into some kind of gender war instead of recognizing that he was trying to build something better for both of us. He actually tried to say the car would benefit me too because I'd get to ride in it and be seen with someone who had his life together. Like I should be grateful for the privilege of being associated with his fancy car that I paid for. This fool genuinely thought I should be thankful for the opportunity to bankrupt myself so he could look cool in front of his friends. As if being seen in a car I couldn't afford was some kind of amazing gift he was offering me. I told him that if he wanted to impress people with expensive things, he should use his own money, like every other adult on the planet. Then he said something that truly made me realize just how little respect he actually had for me. He told me that my job at the pharmacy wasn't a real career anyway, just something I was doing temporarily until I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my life. He said since I wasn't investing in my own future, the least I could do was invest in his. I couldn't believe he was dismissing my career like that. I've been working in pharmacy for 3 years. I'm good at what I do. I help people get the medications they need, and I actually enjoy most aspects of my job. But apparently, none of that mattered because it didn't make enough money to impress Malcolm's friends or fund his lifestyle upgrades. When I told him that my career was important to me, and that I wasn't just killing time until something better came along, he just laughed. He said I was being defensive about a job that anyone could do with minimal training. He sneered that if I was serious about having a real career, I'd be working on improving myself instead of making excuses about bills and rent. The disrespect was so complete, so devastating, that I actually felt a pang of pity for him. Imagine being so insecure about your own job that you have to put down your girlfriend's honest work just to feel better about yourself. I told him that at least my job actually helps people instead of just pushing paperwork around an insurance office, and he completely lost it. Malcolm started screaming that I was being cruel and attacking him personally when he was just trying to have an honest conversation about our future. I wanted to yell, "Buddy, you just spent 10 minutes trashing my career, and now you want to talk about hurt feelings." But it got even worse. Malcolm started talking about how he'd been reconsidering our whole relationship lately and wondering if I was really the kind of partner he needed for the life he wanted to build. He actually said, and I quote, "Successful men need supportive women who understand that sometimes you have to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gains." I asked him, through gritted teeth, what gains I was supposed to be getting from bankrupting myself for his car. His answer: "You'd gain a boyfriend who felt confident and successful and could therefore be a better partner to me." So, my reward for destroying my financial stability was supposed to be a slightly happier Malcolm. The logic was so insane, so utterly narcissistic, that I started laughing out loud. I told him that if his confidence depended on me giving him my rent money, then maybe he should work on his self-esteem issues instead of trying to make them my financial responsibility. That really set him off, and he started yelling about how I was being mean and unsupportive and turning everything into a personal attack. Then he brought up the social media situation again, saying he'd been getting a lot of support from people who understood his frustration with my attitude. He actually suggested I read some of the comments on his post to get a better perspective on how other people viewed our situation. He, a grown man, actually thought internet strangers calling me names might help me see the error of my ways. I literally started cracking up at this point. I told him that taking relationship advice from random people on social media was about as smart as asking ChatGPT to plan his budget or getting life coaching from a magic 8-ball. Like, seriously, what's next? Malcolm, are you going to check your horoscope to see if Mercury is in retrograde before making any major decisions about our future? The fact that he thought random internet comments were somehow valid relationship advice showed me just how utterly disconnected from reality he really was. I told him that anyone who thought demanding your girlfriend's entire paycheck was reasonable probably wasn't someone whose opinion I valued very highly, and that maybe he should stick to getting his validation from people who actually know what a healthy relationship looks like. He got even more defensive, saying I was making fun of him instead of taking his concerns seriously, which just made me laugh harder. I mean, when someone suggests that Facebook trolls should be your relationship counselors, What other response is there? That's when Malcolm brought up the nuclear option. He reminded me about our private text conversations and said he really hoped he wouldn't have to share those with anyone, but that he needed to know I was taking the situation seriously. He said he had screenshots of messages that might not look great taken out of context. The threat was crystal clear, even though he tried to dress it up as concern. Give him the money, or he'd release private conversations that he could manipulate to make me look bad. He was holding our entire relationship intimacy hostage to get what he wanted. I told him, my voice steady now, that threatening to violate my privacy was not the action of someone who loved me. And he got defensive, saying he wasn't threatening anything, just pointing out that our private conversations should probably stay private. But the implication was obvious: cooperate or face the consequences. But honestly, at this point, I was just impressed by how many different ways he could find to be a terrible person in one conversation. Public humiliation, financial manipulation, emotional blackmail, career dismissal, and now threats to violate my privacy. It was like he was going down a checklist of abusive behaviors, just to see which one would finally break me. But then he said something that made me realize this was about way more than just the car. He told me that he'd been thinking about our future together, and he needed to know that I was the kind of woman who would support his ambitions and help him achieve his goals. He actually said, if I couldn't do this one thing for him, how could he trust me to be there for the bigger challenges that successful couples face? So, in Malcolm's mind, this wasn't about a car at all. This was about establishing the power dynamic in our relationship. He wanted to prove that he could make unreasonable demands and I'd comply. He wanted to train me to prioritize his wants over my basic needs. He wanted to see if he could manipulate me into financial dependence and submission. The conversation went on for almost an hour, with him trying every single angle to convince me. But every single approach came back to the same basic, disgusting demand: give him my money and accept that his wants were inherently more important than my needs. He never once acknowledged that what he was asking for was unreasonable, or that I had legitimate concerns about my own financial survival. By the end of the call, I was utterly exhausted from trying to explain basic concepts like personal boundaries and financial responsibility to someone who seemed fundamentally incapable of understanding that other people's needs mattered, too. Malcolm ended the conversation by saying he'd give me until Friday to think about everything and make the right decision. The right decision. As if there was only one acceptable outcome, and anything else would be wrong, selfish, and proof that I didn't really love him. He never apologized for the public humiliation, or the threats, or the complete dismissal of my career. He was so completely focused on getting what he wanted that he couldn't even pretend to care about how his appalling behavior was affecting me. Last update. Oh my God, I am living for what happened on Friday. And I need to share every single detail because what went down was so much better, so much more satisfying than anything I could have ever planned. So, Friday morning rolls around. Malcolm's big deadline day. The day I was supposed to cave and hand over my paycheck like a good little girlfriend. Instead, I decided it was time to take some real action instead of just talking in endless circles with that manipulative loser. I called my dad Thursday night and told him the entire situation. Malcolm demanding my paycheck, the threats, his psycho mother ambushing me, everything. My dad was furious. He kept asking me to repeat certain parts, like he couldn't believe someone would actually behave that way toward their own girlfriend. Friday morning, my dad called me around 11 a.m., asking if I was at work. I told him I'd called in sick because, honestly, I was too angry and stressed to deal with customer problems all day. He said, good, because he had some business to handle and wanted me to come with him as a witness. But here's where it gets absolutely perfect. My dad's co-worker, Kenneth, had actually seen Malcolm's viral post on Facebook. Kenneth had called my dad that very morning, laughing about this pathetic guy demanding his girlfriend's paycheck for a car. Kenneth was reading the comments out loud, all the people calling me a gold digger and selfish, not realizing for a second he was talking about his co-worker's daughter. When my dad told Kenneth exactly who that post was about, Kenneth went completely silent. Then my dad, calm but simmering, said he needed to go have a conversation with this boy about how men are supposed to treat women. and Kenneth, without hesitation, offered to come along as backup. My dad picked me up, and we drove straight to Malcolm's office. I tried to tell him, "Dad, maybe this isn't the best idea," but he cut me off. He said no man was going to publicly humiliate his daughter, threaten her, and get away with it. He said Malcolm was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong family. My dad marched right into that office like he owned the place. The receptionist, bless her heart, tried to stop him, but he just said, loudly, for half the office to hear, that he needed to speak with Malcolm about the lies he'd been spreading about his daughter online. People started gathering, whispering, eager to watch. Malcolm came out to the lobby looking utterly confused. But then he saw me, standing right behind my dad, and his face went completely white. He knew. My dad didn't waste a single second on small talk. He just asked Malcolm, in a voice that was dangerously calm, if he was the one who posted about demanding his girlfriend's entire paycheck and then called her a gold digger when she said no. Malcolm started stuttering, trying to stammer something about it being a misunderstanding and that social media posts don't tell the whole story. But my dad cut him off. "There's no misunderstanding," he said, his voice steel, about a grown man demanding his girlfriend's rent money for a toy car and then crying online when she had the backbone to say no. The entire office was absolutely silent, watching. Malcolm looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. My dad kept his voice level, but every single person could hear every word as he asked Malcolm what kind of man threatens a woman with revenge for not bankrupting herself for his wants. Malcolm tried to backtrack, saying private relationship issues shouldn't be discussed at his workplace. My dad's response was ice cold. Maybe Malcolm should have thought about that before he made their private relationship issues public on social media so strangers could call his daughter names. Then my dad really started laying into him. He said he'd raised 3 daughters and never once had to teach them that real men don't beg for money from women, don't send them mommies to fight their battles, and don't throw tantrums when they don't get their way. He asked Malcolm, his gaze piercing, if his own father knew what kind of man he'd raised, because any decent father would be ashamed to have a son who behaves like such a pathetic excuse for a man. Malcolm was turning bright red, sweat beading on his forehead, trying to stutter out some kind of response. But my dad wasn't finished. He said it was embarrassing watching a man act like a spoiled child who throws fits when he can't have expensive toys, and that maybe Malcolm should have spent less time planning how to manipulate women and more time learning how to be an actual adult. Then, my dad turned to Malcolm's coworkers. "Have any of you ever seen anything like this before? A grown man who expects his girlfriend to pay his bills while he spends her rent money on cars." He declared, "Where I come from, men protect and provide for their families. They don't leech off women and then abuse them when the money runs out." The humiliation on Malcolm's face was absolutely beautiful. His co-workers were all staring, whispering, and you could practically see him realizing that his reputation was being utterly destroyed in real time. One of the older women in the office actually said out loud, "Well, I've never heard of anything so ridiculous in my life." Then my dad dropped the ultimatum that made Malcolm's day even worse. He told Malcolm he had until midnight to get every single thing that belonged to him out of my apartment, and that anything left behind would be in a dumpster by Saturday morning. He said Malcolm had lost the privilege of living with a woman who was too good for him the moment he decided to publicly humiliate her for not funding his midlife crisis. Malcolm started panicking, practically begging, saying he needed more time, that he couldn't find a new place that quickly. But my dad, unflinching, said that wasn't his problem or mine. He said Malcolm should have thought about housing before he decided to bite the hand that was feeding him. My dad then suggested, with chilling sarcasm, maybe his mommy could take him in, since she seemed so invested in his relationship decisions. He told Malcolm he was lucky he was getting until midnight instead of being thrown out on the street right that minute, which is what would have happened if my dad had raised such a disrespectful son. He looked Malcolm dead in the eyes and said, "Real men don't threaten women, don't manipulate them for money, and don't send their mothers to harass their girlfriends in parking lots like some kind of pathetic mama's boy." Then my dad did something I will never, ever forget. He pulled out his phone. Since Malcolm seems to think public humiliation is an appropriate way to handle relationship problems, my dad said, his voice resonating through the now silent office. Maybe Malcolm would like to make a public apology right now, to set the record straight about what kind of man he really is. Malcolm started begging my dad not to record anything, saying his job was already in jeopardy and he couldn't handle any more public embarrassment. My dad just held the phone up. You should have considered the consequences, he said, before you decided to act like a manipulative little boy who throws fits when women won't give him money. But my dad was already recording. He told Malcolm he could either explain to everyone watching why he thought financial abuse was acceptable, or he could apologize for being a lying, manipulative coward who picks on women because he's too weak to handle actual adult responsibilities. The whole office was completely silent, every eye fixed on Malcolm as this unbelievable scene unfolded. Malcolm looked around at all his co-workers, their faces a mix of shock and disgust, staring at him, and he just completely broke down. He started crying, sobbing, saying he was sorry, that he'd made terrible mistakes, and that he knew he didn't deserve someone like me. My dad, still recording, told Malcolm to be specific about what he was apologizing for and why he thought it was acceptable to treat women like ATMs with benefits. So, there he was, Malcolm, sobbing in front of his entire office, admitting on camera that he tried to financially manipulate his girlfriend and threaten her into funding his expensive car through public humiliation and blackmail. It was the most pathetic, humiliating thing I've ever seen in my life. This grown man, who'd spent a week acting like he had all the power, completely falling apart the moment someone finally stood up to him. His co-workers were looking at him like he was absolutely insane. And honestly, who could blame them? Watching him crumble like that, a man who thought he could control me with threats and public shaming, was pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was a moment I finally understood that I didn't just lose a boyfriend. I gained my self-respect back. This whole ordeal has left me speechless, but also stronger. So, I have to ask, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to deal with a partner or their family trying to manipulate you like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.